Hey, listeners, thanks for tuning in again. For this episode, we would be remiss not to issue just a slight content warning. While nothing in our discussion gets particularly graphic or needlessly hideous, we do have quite a few tough discussions in this episode, including a discussion about animal abuse and experimentation. If these topics may bring you distress, by all means, feel free to tune out, do something you find more comfortable. As always, please take care, enjoy responsibly. And for those of you who are tuning in, on to the episode.
After all this, you still...
I still want that gas, yes. And you had better deliver.
We should probably jump into the timeline of events, but I'm also curious, like, the tech enthusiasts who had a positive reception to this, is it the usual suspects of, like, tech reporting? Or is it, like, a certain subset within them that is tooting the Musk horn at this point?
I mean, at this point, so right now we're in like mid 2017s. There's not a lot of information, right? So Elon Musk says we're gonna put a chip in someone's brain, and it's gonna be cool, and we're gonna cure mental illnesses, and everyone applauds. That's kind of all that's happened right now. There's the usual suspects. Yeah, I guess that's a good way to put that. It is the usual suspects. It's your Elon Musk enjoyers. It's your loud, socially awkward tech bro who, Elon Musk. And it's interesting because all of there were a ton of, medical experts. There were a ton of, like, scientists that were like, I don't know about this, but they just completely get drowned out.
Yeah, we just keep coming back to, like, Elon Musk dick riders is, like, uniquely, like, delusional, right? Like, I almost want to. I do want to apologize to J. Cole fans for everything I've said. Like, say what you want about J. Cole. He at least made 2014 Forest Hills Drive.
True.
What has Musk done?
That is a great. Yeah.
So what happens next? What happens next after he announces this?
Okay, so next happens is nothing. There's completely no progress in 2017, 2019. In 2019, if you asked me what Neuralink was, I would not have known. Like, I would have completely forgot about it. There's no like news, there's no transparency. And apparently, again, this is a retroactive claim, but the lack of transparency, it's a criticism. I didn't even know that at the time because it just was not a thing that was on my radar. Mm-hmm. And then you get the big thing. And the big thing is in 2020 when you have Gertrude. Gertrude is a pig that has this implant on her ear. And the implant, it's essentially it's like a prototype of Neuralink. According to Elon Musk and the Neuralink team, she had the implant for 2 months, and essentially it was supposed to, like, show, like, neurons firing, and they just had the pig, like, walk around and touch things. And I want to note that this Neuralink thing, it's gotten how do I describe it? It's gotten more invasive, if that makes sense. Before, Neuralink was just I don't even know how to describe it. It was like a pad, like a coin-shaped pad behind this. It was supposed to be like a coin-shaped pad behind a person's ear, and, like, stick wires on their heads, and it would measure the brain activity. But because of the limitations of technology and the amount of neurons that are being, fired off at I'm not a brain, surgeon or whatever. Now it is literally a coin-shaped chip that sits flesh to your skull. Fun fact. So, like, this is like a much more, like, and I don't want to say this is malicious because that's why I'm trying to, like, get into it and say it. But, like, the Neuralink they showed us on the pig was not invasive. It looked kind of cool. It was just this thing. The pig was fine. But like now today it's like you need surgery to do it, and you need to essentially drill a hole in your skull, and it just got way more insane. Um, but during the pig demonstration was released on YouTube. And again, every single step of the way, there's criticism. There's criticism for lacking scientific rigor, which I found not hilarious because it was very unfortunate for the pig. But it's one of those things where it's like every step of the way, you're releasing something and you have critics, and you never actually sit down and like talk or like interact with these critics. So you just keep like steamrolling ahead with this. And also another very important part about this pig demonstration was that at this point, I believe, I don't quote me on this, but at this point, this is where the pivot happened when Elon Musk starts talking about Neuralink. It pivots away from like being this miracle thing that can, heal mental illnesses and fix quote unquote broken brains into this thing where it's like, now, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to instead take the human brain, throw AI at it, or emerge it in AI. I think that's kind of like the general idea now, where you use AI to do like it's very not clear. He calls it AI symbiosis, where you just merge the human brain with artificial intelligence, and I have yet to find a real definition on what that actually means. Question mark?
That's a good point, because like the funny thing in all of our discussions about AI in the tech and business sphere these days, right, is like AI has become this like genie in a bottle word that like marketing or finance guys can say, and anyone who's not familiar with how AI works or operates is just going to, like their eyes will glaze over and be like, well, the tech guy says it works, so I believe it, right? But as it's turning out, it's like AI is just, it's this like buzzword that no one can really tell you what it translates to. But, in a functional sense, what is AI? It's just, it's code that has predictive capacity and is best used in like a context to replace repeatable work, right? And of course, you can do interesting things with AI, as we've been seeing these past couple years. It has the capacity for generative imagery. It has the capacity for predictive writing and predictive programming. But, in a practical sense, it is very limited. It has very severe limitations. And more broadly, it's not truly sentient or truly artificial. It's very reliant on humans doing the tedious work of marking data,
Absolutely, yeah. I during my sophomore, or I'm sorry, not sophomore, during my senior capstone, we literally, built a project. We had to create our own AI model to look at a parking spot and tell us whether it was empty, whether there was a car in it, or whether there was people with other stuff in it. And like I think the app worked great. It was a great app. Let me just start off by saying my teammates were awesome. It was really fun doing it. But there was a singular point of failure when dealing with this AI model that we essentially trained and built. And it's the same point of failure with like pretty much every single AI model, and that's the data. It's always the data. And that's why, like, I would love to put a giant computer in my skull, right? But there's no AI is touching no.
Do want
to
be NEX so bad. Do want to be NEX so bad.
Exactly, but like I'm not putting any AI near me, because AI is only as good as you train it, right? Like AI is all it is inputs and outputs. It's great, like you said, it's great at predicting text because you can train it. There's a lot of human words. Train it, boom. It's great at generating images. Images are easy. A bunch of images, you throw it in AI, out comes more images. But like when it comes down to it, like we think about tech, like for example, Apple, right? Apple had this huge, fiasco a couple years ago where like people who were like Asian could unlock each other's phone because they didn't train the AI model for not face the thing to unlock your face. They didn't train that. They only trained it on white dudes.
They didn't train face ID for that, and even like all facial recognition software, period, is like heavily plagued by bias. You know, like
Exactly.
that's like a big concern of like facial recognition in like in criminal procedures, right? Because it's like the AI is oftentimes programmed or predicated upon a lack of information that is, you know, it's just a deeper example of systemic racism at work, right? Where the data that's been marked is done so under like the presumption of whose face is white people usually, right? So it doesn't even begin to predict the full spectrum of human appearance, but also like it just the whole boogeyman and specter of AI and robotics, right? It's being used to promise things that like the technology isn't there to do yet, you know? And I think like investors and people who have big like faith in robotics and AI are most likely like those who want to shut down the power of labor to resist, or want to, you know, skim every last piece of overhead and avoid paying labor costs. Like I think that's the market reason for why there's an interest in AI to a certain extent, right? But and you and I have talked about this before. We can definitely have an extended discussion on this point of like, I think like where the technology exists and probably where it's best used is to cut back on repeatable or avoidable work that's like tedious. And I would argue that some predictive tasks or even like certain facets of writing are tedious or predictive tasks, which is why like a machine may be capable of replicating or doing those tasks. But it's again, it's highly contingent on the data marking work. And if people don't understand that, they are willfully, you know, sipping the Kool-Aid, huffing the fumes, and giving their money to charlatans.
Exactly. And like that's the thing. It's like you're absolutely correct. AI is great for repeatable tasks. It's great for predicting things. It's only as good as the data. But like when you have something that can do repeatable tasks, like you can just like have the workers work less, pay them the same because you're not actually losing. There are ways to do this and integrate AI without like complete corporate greed. And I feel like most companies, companies obviously are never going to do that, right? Going back to AI in terms of your own brain, I guess the point I was trying to make was that the data, the bias in the data that you use to train the AI is essentially going to be directly downloaded into your brain. And that is not something that anyone genuinely wants, but it's just a natural consequence of training, right? There's always going to be biases. There's always going to be, you know, there's no such thing as objectivity. So even when you have Elon Musk's chip in your brain and you look at Elon Musk's current view and you look at how he views unionization, you look at how he views like society, you know, hierarchical structures, you want that dude's biases in your brain? That's, you know, it could not be me.
Yeah, you absolutely don't want his evil within you literally and spiritually, right? There is that aspect to it too. But then there's also just like the more mundane charlatanry at work here, which is like he's not even telling you what this integrated AI is. He just knows that by saying it, it's gonna get someone excited.
Yeah, like what does it mean to merge my brain with AI? What does that mean? Like that no one can give me a real take on like what's the data? What are we doing with AI that's me out specifically? No one can give me any like real answer on that.
Yeah, just in an ethical and spiritual sense, it seems monstrous. But then even at like a logical or logistical standpoint, it's nonsensical.
So speaking of ethical and sensical, let's talk about human trials.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, so essentially 2020 he announced human trials and they were delayed and everyone was like, "Oh no, it's not going to work." And my favorite was that after a lot of people raised doubts about the timeline and feasibility of this product, he circles back. So it goes from we're gonna cure mental illnesses to we're gonna merge our brains with AI, and now it's we're gonna merge our brain with AI, but now also with telepathy, which I think is just amazing. He literally said that. That is, it's not a direct quote, but I can if I googled hard enough, I could find the exact quote. But telepathy was one of the things that he uh, genuinely wanted to somehow enable with Neuralink. So a lot of this is kind of where steam starts rolling when it comes to the bullshittery that is Neuralink. You have like data privacy issues, you have implant safety issues, you have misuse, which could happen. So Elon Musk says, I'm going to try to do human trials. FDA early 2022 says no. They rejected the application for human trials due to, and I quote, dozens of issues that need to be addressed. I don't, there, I have some skepticism about this because early 2022, FDA says no. May 15th or May 25th, 2023, FDA says, yeah, sure, let's do it. So I'm not sure how much development happened between, I want to say like February of 2022 versus, that whole year of till May 25th, 2023. But apparently they completely changed the mind of the FDA, which in my brain, I think that I'm a little conspiratory here. My conspiratory sense says they showed the FDA originally what Neuralink is now, but like to get the actual FDA training, the conspiracy theory side of me goes, oh, they showed what was on where it was like less invasive and a lot more safe. And
Yeah, and I think there's definitely like a more mundane reading of that, which is like our government systems have just kind of teetered towards deregulation in a very bad way. So I feel like whatever enterprising guy at the FDA was just like, "Ooh, I like Elon Musk. I'll let it happen." It's probably like it probably got approved for even more mundane reasons than we might think.
fair, yeah, that could be true, but it is always fun to
Oh
raise
yeah,
the
oh yeah.
conspiracy flag.
Because I wonder like what changed in a year, that like allowed this testing to happen, and I I don't want to derail this timeline again, but I think it's relevant to bring this up. How familiar are you with the background of Theranos by any chance?
Not very.
So Theranos, much like a lot of companies you read about these days,
Oh,
was an
Theranos.
yeah, Theranos, yeah.
Yes, with Elizabeth Holmes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So for those of you who aren't familiar yet, I urge all of you to read up on Theranos, look at Elizabeth Holmes. If you don't want to do the reading, there is a excellent mini series on Hulu called The Dropout, which is a somewhat fictionalized but somewhat true to form retelling of the events of the entire Theranos scandal, right? Where it's like they start with this. It's even like less implausible than what Neuralink is proposing, but even then, it's like, so you're telling me you can do a full suite of blood work tests with just one drop of blood? How is that even physically possible? And then at every stage of the way, through charisma, through lies, through trickery, and through like a literal con artistry, right? They're able to convince several influential people, including like I think like the CEO of like Walgreens. They even get like a retired general on board. They get a bunch of they get like a Texas oil guy on board, and they get a lot of these people, fooled, one by like the promise of big money, but also like this promise of a future and of technological innovation that gets people huffing the fumes. And like it's hard not to see the parallels between Theranos and this, where it's this like fantastical promise that doesn't add up at any level. And I wonder like to what degree like the FDA approving human testing is just off of the con artistry here.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point. I feel like it's kind of like a two-part issue. Part number one is the fact that historically technology has grown so fucking right. Like you look at the early 2000s, and you take years backwards, and you look at the technology we had in like 1990s. It's so drastically different, right? Technology has grown so fast, and I feel like it has kind of given people the expectation that like what is impossible today will be possible tomorrow. And while I do think that with scientific achievements through rigorous testing and all that stuff, there is some truth to that. I think that when you start adding investments and speculation and money onto it, that's when you start running like snake oil salesmen, people who are willing to just take advantage of people. Because like with Elizabeth Holmes, there's not even an excuse for her. Like, she knew that the technology wasn't real. She knew that she was using other companies' machines. She knew, right, the entire time. So like you have this wild speculation on technology, which is a thing that's known to be volatile. It's just a recipe for disaster.
Exactly.
And speaking of
actually, I'm going to look on this
ahead.
in the background. I'm going to look at this in the background, but you go ahead.
Okay. So speaking of recipe for disaster, we're going to talk about the meat and bones of this Neuralink debacle, and that is August 2023. We have the trial with the monkey. So there was a Wired report that so essentially 15 monkeys minimum, I think the number might have gone even higher actually, have ended up dying because of trials that Neuralink ran insert its chip onto I forget how many monkeys there were. There was a decent amount of monkeys.
Like the monkey studies were like probably the most monstrous revelation of the Neuralink project. I did just do some light reading. The reason why Neuralink finally got the approval is because they have what's called an investigational device exemption, which allows a device that's part of a clinical study to be used to collect data to support a pre-market approval. So basically, they somehow tied this to a clinical study. And I would also reckon that like there is this like weird, like somewhat understated trend I see in like some Republicans in the Senate. I would have to like find better reporting on this, and if I find it, I'll link it in the description. There are certain like I would argue like senators who get campaign contributions from big pharma who are supporting like this like deregulatory approach to allow more experimental treatments, and then specifically to like allow experimental treatments to be used on patients earlier. And they can always frame it as like a civil rights or personal liberty issue. Let me just look this up. Senators.
Wow.
Experimental treatment.
I was actually kind of just hoping that I was right with the bait and switch. The bait and switch conspiracy idea. I feel like that would make me feel better than the fact that no, they just like filed an exemption, just said fuck the FDA and got their exemption now.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, let's see. I think because I'm seeing Senator Ron Johnson here. Isn't he from like Texas? Is that who it is? Wisconsin. Like I'm sure it's got to be at least a couple of Democrats too, but I'm for sure like just look at this like Right to Try Act of 2016, and then it finally passes in 2018.
Wow.
So like I'm for sure there's got to be some kind of
that's super interesting. The timing on that is very interesting because in 2018 was exactly when Neuralink was actually doing the monkey trials. Right, it came out earlier this year with the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine.
Yeah, and I think the article I was reading a while ago was about Ron Johnson's push towards right to try regulation.
It'd be very interesting if this was all like directly connected.
Yeah, and it's like again, like I'm always like like somewhat. I feel tenuous talking about some of this stuff because this can be an easy backdoor into like anti-vax conspiracism and like
Right.
because there are these like weird like intersections between like big pharma and like anti-capitalist critique of the pharmaceutical industry,
And that's fair.
and like
That's a good thing, I think. But I think you're right. The problem is that the intersection between that and the crazy
pseudoscience and like just like the anti-vax crowd and like all of like the COVID-19 conspiracism is it's one that just it's very fine water to tread, but it is interesting to note that like you can't separate the Neuralink tests from this increased environment of deregulation and this preponderance of pharmaceutical money on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, and it's crazy because it doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how many lessons we have to learn before we realize that we cannot just deregulate and deregulate in the name of science, or even because at the end of the day, it's just gonna fall back to the name of money. That's exactly why we had this.
Well, yeah,
opioid crisis.
because they say it's in the name of science, but like let's talk about what we're really getting at. You know, it's
Exactly. Like it doesn't matter how many opioid addicts there are, how many codeine addicts there are. It doesn't matter how many. It doesn't matter. We're just gonna keep deregulating and deregulating.
The bigger the government, the less freedom they got. It's like a seesaw. You tell me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely explains the FDA approval announcement. But the monkey trials, again, this has probably been like the most like shocking and horrifying revelation.
Absolutely. So the physical I can't talk. The Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine ended up filing a complaint to the USDA. But it wasn't even specifically against Neuralink. It was against, I think, the University of California, Davis, as well as Neuralink, due to the fact that Neuralink implanted its chips into several monkeys. I think it was around 20. I keep forgetting the exact number of monkeys, but it caused, and I quote, extreme suffering. So what ended up happening with that was that the PCRM essentially successfully showed that their monkeys faced severe complications, and had to be euthanized. Some of the complications were like bloody diarrhea, perfectly fine monkeys that became partially paralyzed. I don't even know what this is, but it sounds bad. Cerebral edema.
That's brain swelling.
Jesus. And so there was tons of like ethical, concerns about these monkeys who, so many of them had to be euthanized. Also, more has come out since then, and that some Neuralink employees have also started blowing the whistles, right? There is an experiment where 25 pigs had the wrong size device implanted, and I think they all ended up having to be euthanized. And it wasn't because they didn't do this on purpose. It was because the Musk like had unrealistic demands of his workers, and it was just a genuine mistake, right? I believe that overall the death toll from its conception till now is I believe it's around 2,000 animals. That's not even like a. Yeah, actually, I think that's fairly 1,500 to be exact. Yeah, 1,500 animals. There's been more than 280 sheep, pigs, and monkeys that have been completely like killed alone following the experiment just in 2018.
That's like monstrous. I don't even.
It's so insane, and the fact that like not a lot of people know or like want to talk about this is insane. There was monkeys that had skin infections because they kept ripping out part of the implants out of their like head. There were monkeys that were doing self mutilation. There were like there was a monkey that they tried to do an experiment on where they tried to see if the animal could like play video games with his mind. The Elon Musk said that the monkey looked happy, and I believe that the monkey ended up dying due directly because of the implant. Like Elon Musk is this is what happens when you give someone who has no understanding of animals or biology all this power, right?
Right.
Um, death of monkeys and death of various hundreds of animals also isn't even like the biggest thing with Neuralink. I think the Department of Transportation is currently doing an investigation into Neuralink because Neuralink illegally transferred devices that were removed from monkeys' brains and still had some of the brain matter attached to the devices. And that is obviously a health risk. Like there are illnesses that can infect humans due to that kind of exposure. Also, the FDA, some of the FDA's concerns about the implant involve lithium-ion batteries directly into the brain of the patient, which is obvious, which can be a problem with like overheating, can be a problem with corrosion. For example, a lot of these instances with the animals dying have to do with the animal self-mutilating because like there would be like rust or like some type of corrosion that leaks off from the device. Like it gets really, really, really.
And we already know about like the volatility of lithium batteries in like stable conditions.
Exactly.
Like, even under like perfect conditions, quality control, proper operating conditions, lithium batteries can sometimes explode.
Yeah, exactly.
But then to implant that in something's body, oh god, that's horrifying.
Yeah, and then on top of that, there's even more shit. Like there's fraud. There's just straight up fraud that's happening. PCRM, like I said earlier, the physicians committee, they accuse Elon Musk of doing securities fraud in letters to the SEC. They claimed, or I'm sorry, Neuralink claimed that the most of the animals that had been put down or euthanized, they were already in like a deteriorating state. So like the monkeys were already old, right? They were dying anyways. Like there was nothing we could do to save them, so let's just test this new technology on them. It turns out that the veterinary records completely contradicted those statements, and that the implants were the direct cause of death, not like what Elon Musk was lying and saying, and that like a large majority of these animals that he's been testing on were completely healthy before they got the chip.
It's incredibly disturbing and frustrating to uncover some of this, right? Not only just like, just how much like avoidable suffering could have been avoided here, but also just like from the jump, like this just looks patently fraudulent.
Yeah,
and these animals are still subjected to death basically in the name of the spectacle of progress, in the name of the spectacle of research.
Right, not even actual research or actual progress,
And it's monstrous to think that even in spite of seeing what this has done to animals, they're still ready to do the same to people now.
Yeah, that's the most insane part to me. Like there was Elon Musk once claimed that the animals are essentially they're cycled in and out relatively quickly, right? Like there isn't a huge amount of time in which like the they have the monkeys for like behavioral training or whatever to like monitor the behavior. This time, according to Elon Musk, was relatively short. It turns out that it was like exponentially longer than what Elon Musk like had said. So like they kept these animals in like a dying and like a painful state with this chip for a lot longer than they originally put on, right? These animals that essentially ripped. So a lot of them ripped themselves apart trying to get it out, and yet for some godforsaken reason, the FDA is still stamping their exemption onto this project and still allowing for human trials, specifically human child trials that are for like patients dealing with paralysis, which is just
it's monstrous to consider that this could be like a population of vulnerable people now
exactly
being put on. It's monstrous. It's incredibly monstrous to observe this.
Yeah, I don't like I I'm almost at a loss for words. Like, cuz again, I didn't realize how like bad it all was until I really looked into it. And I think I really started following the project a little closely around like 2021 maybe is when I really like, oh, okay, this is interesting. I saw this pig. Let me stay up to date on this. And like the more you look around and the more you think about what's going on, the more disastrous and fraudulent and it would be different if it was just fraudulent and that, oh no, Elon Musk just stole a bunch of money, but like thousands of animals have died.
Yeah, and it's like I don't know. This is couched within so many other issues, right? Of like animal welfare and the ethics of using animals as test subjects. But you could at least hypothetically argue that that kind of testing is necessary for some kind of medical intervention that could save lives. But in this case, as we've mentioned, this is like a patently Potemkin and fraudulent site. It's like concept for investigation. Like from the jump, it doesn't even pass like a basic sniff test, and to inflict this level of like suffering and to just objectively be like, okay, this is cruel what happened to these animals, and more than that, like it's like it seems like almost biblical shit. Like not to be darkly comedic about it, but like if you subject something to this and it dies in the process to rip the thing out, I don't know what other conclusions you're supposed to take from it, scientifically or otherwise. But then to have basically like sacrificed blood on the altar of alleged progress, it's bizarre. It's not even science as we traditionally understand it. It's this bloody spectacle of study and this bloody spectacle of research that's being presented as something transformational or progressive. It's demonic. I'm not using that term lightly. I'm being very serious that like to inflict this kind of suffering for no clear benefit is so confusing. And the fact that animal lives are cheap is one thing. I already don't like that conclusion in some cases, right? But then to apply an equal cheapness to human life is especially dizzying, People, at least to their credit, will take human lives seriously. They're not even doing that in this case. So what's left?
What's left is to put the chip directly in your brain. That's it.
Well, you know what? I'm making an equivalent chip called Dookie Link. We're gonna put it up your ass.
Yeah, no, I think as of now there's thousands of people, according to this Business Insider article. There's quote unquote thousands of people who are already signed up to take the chip.
I mean, this is like there is a public epidemic of dick riding. I'm not even. I'm joking, but I'm not. Like when the evidence is this harshly stacked against the project, it's like clear as day. Like this is not what you're supposed to be doing. And for people to still like have drunk the Kool-Aid to such an extent that they're willing to subject possibly vulnerable elements of our population to test this. And then you have the existing cohort of Elon dick riders ready to inject the chip and just implode their brains for you know, for the validation of themselves and their parasocial relationship with this weirdo Elon Musk. I can't think of a greater indictment of the background level of evil, the hollowness at the heart of our society, and the absolute lack of an imagination any of us have.
I mean, I like the lack of imagination, but like even more for Elon Musk, honestly. Like there are other like brain computer implants. Like they are a real thing. But like there are other projects that exist that do the exact same thing but have caused way less deaths, that have a way less of a toll on animal life. You know? So like the fact that these devices did all of that just through the testing phase. You know? Like I can't even comprehend. Like it's just so it's disturbing and fucked up to the point where like there's nothing you can do but laugh. It's like what can you do about that?
And it's not a laugh because we find it funny. It's like the kind of like, you know, worried, nervous laugh of like a man at the gallows.
Yeah,
you know?
literally. It's like what are we gonna do? We're gonna have thousands. Like how many people do you think are gonna die from this human trial? It's definitely gonna be more than one. There's thousands of people signing up. It's gonna be in the hundreds. That's maybe I'm doom and gloom, but that's in the hundreds is like a best case scenario.
It'd be like absolutely preventable. Like the animal deaths were preventable and the human deaths were 100% preventable. But because the emperor has no clothes, the fantasy must be maintained.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, like there's a lot of issues like that in our contemporary society that seem to operate on a similar logic, you know, like a ceasefire in Gaza would be the most common sense, rational, sober course of action for any of us to take. And that is being presented as if it's too far of a demand for any of us to make.
Right.
That you know, the billionaire class pays like $1 more in taxes is haram in our social religion in the United States. That Elon Musk's, you know, patently hollow and false desire to spill blood must be adhered to. It's a grand indictment of the world we live in, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And unfortunately, I think that the only way we get a wake up call is with these human trials. It's so unfortunate to say it out loud, but like, how else are we gonna get it? How else are we gonna get the wake up call that like maybe this is a bad idea? We're gonna have like paralyzed people potentially dying, potentially, you know, going brain dead because they.
I mean, I could go darker. I could, you know, you could even get darker and say that we all saw this coming, and even as people will soberly realize that this should have been preventable, and there might even be a massive public outcry in response, they're gonna hit you with, well, they signed up of their own volition. What are you gonna do?
Oh my God. Yeah, that's so much.
That will be the defense. That will be the defense. And I'm like, I think like, you know, like it is a popular refrain in today's like left wing discourse of the cruelty is the point,
Yeah.
but never before has it been so true.
Yeah, no, you're right. There was he's actually another interesting criticism of Neuralink is the fact that it's very invasive. Like the surgery could be done in a much better, much less invasive way, but Elon Musk said that he wants more signals from the brain. He wants more information, so therefore they have to do it in this weird drill a hole in your brain type of way. Even though there are already other, like I said, there are already plenty of other brain computer implants that do not use the same type of surgery. So, you're right. I usually stay away from, kind of echoing out these mottos, these phrases, but no, you're right. Cruelty literally is the point.
And I again, like I don't know what the remedy is, because that power is out of my hands, right? But there was an existing environment of discourse, I want to say a couple months ago, maybe even last year, these ever worsening fears of transhumanism and of a future marked thematically by techno-feudalism as a concept, right? I don't think we're necessarily in the same contours of that debate anymore. I think the political right that was embellishing some of these fears, mainly because, they always have to tie it back to wokeism, like was really muddying the waters. But techno-feudalism, at least in a very simplistic way of describing the kind of things that big tech CEOs are going to get away with in the coming years, is probably a good way to understand some of these ensuing events. Whether it's Peter Thiel, ratcheting up the culture war, whether it's Musk literally putting just I mean, like, again, people talk about the sanctity of life. This is a guy who doesn't respect the sanctity of life, period.
Exactly.
He's doing that. Whether it was Mark Zuckerberg finding new ways to invade and sell off people's data and privacy. The uber wealthy operate with a degree of impunity and wanton cruelty in our society that the system seems to be complicit in, if not unwilling to challenge them. And you would argue that, like, the benefit of the United States government as it's currently structured, with its, it's even limited structures, right? Of like the FBI white collar crimes division, of its regulatory boards, of its independent actors in the legislature, of its trade offices, could put the kibosh on something like this. But it can't. I mean, it can't.
No, you're absolutely right. Like there's numerous, like, there's at least like a handful of like government organizations that are supposedly doing investigations, or that are supposedly, like, see that there are issues with this, and yet it's still continuing. No, you're entirely correct. This is, I feel like at this point, like the state is almost complicit in the death in the death of these animals by how much they're just enabling this to go on.
And they will be complicit in the people who die if human tests are allowed to continue and proceed.
100%.
And I think that's the thing, right? Is that the American state has always had the opportunity to set itself apart from and set itself in opposition to the robber barons of old, and possibly the tech CEOs of today. But whether it's the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, whether it's the progressive wing of the Democratic Party or the neo-fascist formation within the Republican Party, there is a odd symbiosis between tech capital and the U.S. regulatory state as it currently stands. And, you know, the guys on Pod Safe America can accuse us of exhibiting their fake logical fallacy of the Green Lantern fallacy, you know, that, oh, it's a willpower problem. It fully is. It fully is a problem of will. I think the biggest problem of our age, if it's reducible to any one thing, is that so much barbarism is preventable.
All of it is. Yeah, man. All of it.
But because the levers of power are so thoroughly out of our hands,
it almost does seem kind of hopeless. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, again, like, I don't believe that any of us should give up. I don't believe any of us should cease to have a conscience. I don't think it's ever a good idea to ignore the heart that beats within your chest, right? But horrors time, like horrors like these put the system on trial. And to ignore it, to cast a blind eye to it, even when there's not much you can do.
It's kind of like it's like acquitting the.
Yeah, it is a form of acquittal, and I think like the biggest thing I can say in all of this, right, is that the myth of the genius billionaire has never been more fraught than it is today. And I think we can hold the system on trial too. I definitely hold the system accountable, and I hold our materialist and individualistic culture at fault, right? But at some level, it is our collective ignorance. It is our collective inability to see past some of these myths. It is our willingness to take the capitalists at their words that allowed some of this to happen. There was a time not too long ago where, I mean, like, again, I was, younger, not as, I didn't have the same political education I have now. I didn't have the same ideology or framework that I have now. But I would have taken a Musk at their words with their promise of battery-powered vehicles,
Yeah, same here.
And there are people much older than us, much more qualified than us, with more capital in the system, with more stakes in the system, who believe even bigger lies. And at some level, if your complicity isn't tied to doing the crimes or to being able to do something about it, your ignorance is complicitness. It is complicity. And just disarming yourself by being to arm yourself by being less ignorant is a way to fight back. Just being willing to question the status quo would be a big help these days.
Yeah, man. If enough people did that. I think an important note to make here, though, is that, propaganda is a hell of a drug. And while
you are not immune to it.
Exactly. And while we have these billionaires who are essentially like the pillars of this capitalistic system, we have like people who are the result of this system, people who perpetuate the system. Like they do take advantage of our ignorance, and not only do they take advantage, they also attempt to create more. I think that Elon Musk obviously benefits from speculation of his stock prices to what people are allowing to like pass as good business strategy, to the death of 1,500 animals. Elon Musk is directly benefiting from the image that he is willingly putting out there. He doesn't have to step out in front of a microphone and do interviews and quote anime and do all these quirky, cool billionaire stuff, right? but he does, and I don't think it's just because he's some awkward, he's not some awkward like tech bro who doesn't understand what social interaction is like. Instead, he does it on purpose because he is well aware of how he profits from it. He's well aware of how how society treats him, of the advantageous position it puts him in.
Exactly.
That I think that the fact that we keep doing that, the fact that he keeps doing that, the fact that this propaganda that he is maybe knowingly, maybe unknowingly is spreading, that's probably the most important thing that we need to fight, because if we don't push back against that propaganda, people won't be able to arm themselves with knowledge, right? People won't be able to disarm their ignorance. And I do think that, knowledge of what's actually going on, the ability to question the status quo is 100%, maybe not enough, but it is a step in the right direction. We cannot do that unless we, counteract some of this insane, ridiculous propaganda.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, not to pat ourselves on the back here, but like, at least we sat here and took the time to dispel and denounce the myth of Elon Musk. He's not some Tony Stark. He's not some Howard Hughes. He is the epitome of the naked emperor, and all his courtiers and subjects lying to him.
Yeah.
Except in a more fraught way. If the emperor is naked, what does that say about his subjects who are willing to tell him that? If it's not Musk that's naked, it's all of us. So again, arm yourself with knowledge. Resist the myth of the billionaire who pulled themselves up by the bootstraps. And as always,
most importantly, don't get Neuralink.
Do not
do not get that shit.
Again, if anyone watched the Clone Wars animated series, everybody who pulled that chip out had a better ending. That's all I'm gonna say. But it's just, it's I think in some ways we do have to also be willing to confront monstrosity and harsh stories. I don't necessarily take joy in discussing some of this stuff. It is very gross and sad stuff to talk about. It's very disturbing, right? But you can't oppose what you deem to be wrong, immoral, or unjust if you can't examine what has been done.
That's a good way to put it. You can't, if you want to be able to, parse how you feel about this kind of stuff, you can't be afraid to analyze.
And you have to be able to tie it all together, because we have a tendency to keep all information disparate in our modern context, right? But we have to be able to tie animal abuse at Neuralink to financial misconduct and shady investment and business practices by Musk. We have to be able to tie that to a history of sexual misconduct and abuse of his employees and fellow staff. We have to tie that to a history of stealing and appropriating other people's ideas. We have to tie that to a willingness to put people's lives in danger with his products. You have to tie that to an anti-union ethos that runs in every Tesla factory, and you have to tie it back to his repeated dabbling with the far right. Musk sits at the intersection of all of that. Without an ability to tie these things together, without an ability to examine the holistic context, which again is what a left-wing perspective enables you to do, Yeah. You will be fighting against those who have huffed the Kool-Aid too long. Of course Musk is uncouth. Of course he's a douchebag. But identifying at what nexus he sits will help you expose him better. God. I feel like I have to end this with a prayer, just how depressing this got. I don't know.
Yeah, that was a heavy one.
I do want to just say, like, it is sad too to note that Elon Musk took the name of Nikola Tesla, who I think was in the left-wing tradition to a certain extent, and he had a humanitarian ideal for the use of technology. He was pioneering so much in the field of electrical science, right? With his discovery of alternating current, with the Tesla coil, remote control stuff. I mean, this guy was brilliant. And in his own time, you had Thomas Edison malign and steal everything from him, to the point that Tesla is left insane.
Yeah, it's
and he still just had this view of like making electricity free for everybody. That's if there is any hero to be spoken of today, it is the real Nikolai Tesla, whose vision and scientific genius has been stolen by charlatans across history, whether it was Thomas Edison or Elon Musk.
Cannot agree more. Elon Musk is way more like Edison than he is like Tesla.
100%. And that's really all I can say, Don't associate the name Tesla with these shitty battery powered cars. Associate it with the man himself.
Yeah.
And remember what he stood for. Rest in peace, Nikola Tesla. I will end it on that.
Yep. Rip in peace.
Any other thoughts or anything we might have missed?
No, I think that's it. I mean, I'm really looking forward to the outcome of these human trials, but
I hope everyone has a collective conscience of crisis of conscience, and the human trials are canceled. If there's a prayer to be had, that's one. But yeah, I think that's our episode. Thanks again for tuning in, dear listeners. We're very sorry for how dour this one got, but there has to be a sober reckoning with certain topics. So I encourage all of you to focus on what you value. Hold your humanity close. Hold your loved ones closer. Keep the faith. All of that. John, do you have anything you want to plug?
Not outside the usual. The Twitch stream. I haven't streamed in a minute, but I plan on starting next week now that Yuma is over. Go join DSA or not. That's about it for me.
What about your writing?
Oh, right. Yes. Wow. Jesus. Yes, I am currently working on a series about right-wing dog whistles and their origins and the people who have created them. If you guys want to go and read some stuff about that, that'd be awesome. I have also written my own personal analysis on the Israel and Palestine conflict. I am not a geopolitical expert, and I more kind of did it from the lens of like hierarchy and didn't get too much into the politics of the individual groups that are there. If you want to know my takes on that, it is in that article. I plan on writing more very soon. If you want to check out my Medium, it's jmukes97. Yeah.
Yeah, I will plug John's Twitch channel as well as the Medium page in the description below, along with our link tree. Till next time, thanks for tuning in, dear listener. Take care.